Darrell Bennett here. Good morning, good day to you, and welcome to another edition of Comeback Swinging with Darrell Bennett, where we are devoted to bringing you content that inspires, educates, and empowers you, mind, spirit, and soul. Today, we're going to talk about how to write a book in 90 days. I'm so excited about this because I get so many questions about how to write a book. Darrell, how do I get a book out of my head and onto the shelves, onto a Kindle, somewhere that people can read it, buy it, see it? That's probably one of the biggest questions that I get. And so I want to devote this time today to talking about how you write a book. You can write a book right where you are. I promise you, it is not as daunting as you might think. And I want to kind of walk you through some of the things that I learned along the way. Let me start by establishing credibility first, because I think that's important. You got to show receipts. That's what they say. You got to show receipts. So my first book that I wrote was at 18 years old in 2004. So I'm 36 now. So it's 18 years ago that I put that first book or pen to paper. And to be honest, I did not write the book desiring really to be an author, not initially. The impetus for it was I was a freshman at Morehouse. It was the end of my freshman year. So it was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. And I didn't get accepted to any of the internships I applied for. So I thought about it and I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book. And actually, how it started was I said that I wanted to write a manual for high schoolers about what I wish I had known in high school that now I knew out of high school, sort of my advice. And the more I wrote, I realized maybe I could turn this into a book, and a book was born. Daring to be different, 25 Tips for a Life of Success. Since then, I've written 3 other books. I've written several guides and manuals. I've probably helped over a dozen people get their books out. I've helped people write poetry books. I've helped people write historical books, fiction books, nonfiction. I had a publishing company at one point, and we were publishing people's books. So I have quite a bit to say in this arena. I've watched it evolve really to the point that now anybody anywhere can write a book in a way that you couldn't in 2004. I mean, then it was fewer companies, doing it. If you wanted to print your own books, you had to find the printing companies. Now, Amazon has cut almost everybody out of the chain where you can print your book right where you are, and really make a good amount of money just using the tools you have right in front of you. So let me not get ahead of myself, because today is not going to be about marketing the book or even how you get it to a place of prominence in the public's imagination or minds. This is just about how you get the book out. This is just about how you get the book out, and how you can do it in 90 days. The first book I wrote it in 90 days, start to finish. And so it can be done. I've seen many people do it. And so I want to share with you some of the tips along the way. There's four, and I want to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions and things that people do wrong that kind of hurt their progress and stunt them. All right, so there's like 3 types of people that I'm going to say that come up to me that ask me about books. The first are the kind that I call them the dreamers. Never really put pen to paper. But they all, they feel like there's a book in them. They have a story to tell. Maybe it's about their own lives. Maybe it's something that they've seen. Maybe it's some piece of advice. And they don't even know what to do to even really get started. They have the desire to write. They want to write. They want to put something out there, but they just don't know what to do. So that's the one category. Second category of people who I call the starters, but they stopped. This is probably the largest group that comes to me. Darrell, I wrote something 10 years ago. I haven't picked it up since. Or I've been writing a book for 4 years and I don't, know. They're constantly writing, or they wrote it and they never really did anything with it. They just stopped because they really didn't know what to do next. Because the truth of the matter is, it's one thing to write on your computer or on your iPad or smartphone or whatever you want to write on. But it's another thing to really believe that you can have a published product that the world can then see. And then the third kind are the kind that want more out of their lives. They want to have bigger impact. They want to have, they want to kind of, whether they're like a public branding type person, a lot of times people come to me, they're speakers or they're entrepreneurs or they're in academia, and they want to increase their presence, and in some cases their profit. They don't necessarily have a desire to write a book, but they want to increase their presence and their profit and their brand. And so my advice to them is, have you thought about writing a book? Side note here, I think everybody should have a book. I just really do. It doesn't have to be a book about your life personally, but everybody has something that they can contribute to the world. So whether it's advice, whether it's something you've seen, whether it's a travel adventure, whether it's a desire, maybe it's a hope that you have for the world, I think it's so easy and fun to write a book. And I'll say this, and then I'm going to get into kind of the blueprint for writing in 90 days. I don't know anybody that writes one book. I know people that's never written a book, and I know people that's written many books. I can guarantee you this. When you get one book out, when I say write, I mean publish it too. Even though we're just talking about writing here, we'll talk about publishing later. But I'm using it interchangeably. When you get your book written and published, I promise you, you won't stop there. I've seen it many times. Now, go to the person. I remember one young lady, it took her 10 years to get her first book out. In 3 years, she had 4. Because she said, I don't know what took me so long. Once you get it out there and you see the enthusiasm of other people reading what you put out and people kind of coming back to you with their own thoughts and appreciating your artistry, and you're getting checks for something that you did years before, I guarantee you that'll put a little bit of a fire under your belly. So let's get into the blueprint for writing in 90 days. Before I do that, I promise you I'm not trying to belabor the point, but I want to give you your why. Remember I talked about last broadcast, know your why. I want to talk about briefly, before I get into the blueprint for how to write the book, why do you want to write a book? I'm going to give you some reasons for why I think it is important to write a book. One reason is to tell your story. Again, it doesn't have, when I say your story, that doesn't necessarily mean your personal business. It could just mean something you've seen in life or some advice or something, but there's some perspective that you have, that you, and richness that you bring to the world. So that's one reason to tell your story, to help someone. I mean, you'd be surprised by the amount of people that are drawn to what you have to say. I'm still surprised by the fact that this book I put out in 2004, I'm talking Daring to Be Different, people are still reading it. By the way, it's available on Amazon, it's available on the Kindle, it's available anywhere books are sold online. And I wrote this book not really knowing how many doors it would open and more importantly, how many people it would help. All right. So you would be surprised by the amount of people that you'll help just by putting your story and yourself out there. This is a side thing you'd be surprised with, but I'm talking about why to write a book. It will build your confidence. It really will. You know what it's like? Writing the book at 18 for me was sort of like what it was for me training. I was doing something really physically enduring about a year before, as I was preparing to come out of high school. And I had to learn to run a mile in a certain amount of time. I don't remember what that time is now, but I know it's very competitive at the moment. And I remember how hard I trained for that and how much of, a struggle it was, but how much it built my confidence to see I could do it. I couldn't even get around the track first. The first time that I was preparing for this run without getting winded. One time. And I remember thinking, how in the world am I going to run around this track 5 times in this allotted time? But I did it. And you will be surprised by what happens when you write a book. It will build your confidence. It will let you know it can be done. It's not reserved for those people. You can do it too. It will increase your revenue. Okay, I'm still getting a check for something I wrote in 2004. You will be surprised by, and this is the neat thing too about when you put your book out there. The way that Amazon has changed the game, remember Kevin Hart that said the way my bank account is set up, the way that Amazon has set up everything, the way Amazon is set up, you can put your book out there now. Let's say it's 2022. You can put your book out there now. You can put it out there electronically. You can put it out there for people to buy it. The print book, all of that can be taken care of through fulfillment through a third-party vendor. I'll tell you about this in another podcast. You won't have to lift a finger after you've published this book. 10 years from now, you could still be not just making money from it, but if you play your cards right, 10 years from now, you'll be making more from it than what you made from it 5 years from now. Which means that if every year you put out a book and all you're doing is putting out the one book, at the end of 10 years, let's say you have 10 books and each of them are accruing you revenue, because now we're talking about the power of force multiplying and incremental change. You literally could be sitting within 10 years on passive income of $5,000 a month just from what your books are bringing in. Because think about it, if you have 10 books, 10 books are all being sold every month, and 10 books are $20 a piece, and you're making $10 on each book. I mean, you see what I'm saying? I'm just kind of helping you to do the math here, that it is financially lucrative to pen to paper what it is you want to say. All right, it'll increase your reach. I talk to people who say, oh, I'm doing fine, my business is fine, I really don't need a book. That's all the more reason to put something out there. I mean, if you already have a great reach, imagine how much more your reach will be by delving into the world of people who may never listen to you speak, but will read what you have to say. They may never see your craft, but they'll read. And then, of course, if things are not going well for you business-wise, or your reach isn't what you want it to be, again, that's another reason to say, let me try this. Let me try to write. And I guarantee you it will increase your reach because it'll touch people. You have people that are just looking for books. And by you being published, now you're in that universe. It also establishes credibility. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in the podcast, but 18 years old, wrote my first book. I called it Daring to Be Different. The subtitle was, check this out, 25 Tips for a Life of Success. Now, I had probably been speaking on and off. I mean, I've been speaking my whole life, but I would say on and off, I've been speaking for money since the very tail end of high school. So the question becomes, now I'm a sophomore in college. What do you have to say? If a high school would come and, say, okay, yeah, we'll have you come in and speak. We have $300 for a student speaker to come in to speak, meaning college speaker to come in to speak to our high schoolers. But what would you say? Check this out, the distinction. It was one thing for me to say, I'm here to talk about success. People would look at me, I'm 18, what do you have to say? I'm Black, just keep it real. I mean, still in a world where, and growing up in, or at least part of my life in Newport News, Virginia, I certainly felt like people were looking at me like, who the heck are you? What do you really have to say? But by writing the book, what it then allowed me to do is when someone would say, when we play that question back, what are you here to talk about? Instead of me saying I'm here to talk about success, I'm here to talk about my book where I talk about 25 tips for a life of success. Check that difference? So people in their mind, they think if you wrote a book, you must know something. And people used to say that. I mean, it would amaze me that people would say, if you wrote a book at your age, I figured you must know something. That's why I had you come and speak to our class, or that's why I had you come to speak to this conference. I had people outright in their mouth tell me it wasn't so much that the book was good for why they hired me to come to speak, but what it was the fact that I did it and was 18, right? So it establishes credibility, and that's a whole other thing. It opens up doors. So I'm just telling you, I want to share a bit of my story so you see this can open up so many doors for you. And then the last benefit, and this is something that I didn't think would happen by me putting out the book. So what putting out the book did for me at 18 was it got me thinking like an entrepreneur. Because what happens is, there's a difference between, I heard someone once say, there's a difference between someone who writes and a writer. So, you have someone that writes, you write it, that's me. But a writer has to know, how do I get this book out? How do I get this artistry out to the world in a way that's packaged and that people like and enjoy? So what this got me thinking about at 18 is, okay, now the book is out. Now I'm a sophomore coming into college, or my sophomore year with the book, but how do I market it? How do I get it in front of people? How do I get people to like it? And how do I get people to want to be a part of it? And I'll do a whole podcast with some of the things that I did then and how much, more is at people's disposal now with social media. But the point is, it got me thinking like an entrepreneur. It got me thinking very clearly about how to be a marketer, how to take really essentially, which was a product, and make it scalable and replicate it. That's business minded. So I already now told you, okay, why to write a book. Let's get into how you can get started, what the blueprint is in 90 days. We're going to split this into 3 segments. We're going to start with the creative phase. We're going to go to the development phase, and then I'm going to take you to the editing phase. All right. So let me start with the creative phase. Step back before we even started the creative phase. You want to write a book. Let's make this less daunting. When I work with people, and I do work with people who, want to write books. And let me just say this here. If you're interested in development as an author, either becoming an author or you are an author and you're trying to build your presence, get yourself out there, reach out to me. I coach and counsel people of, how to build your brand, build your business. The first thing that you want to ask yourself is, what do I want to say? What do I want to say? And maybe you have a lot of things that you want to say. So I've written several books now. I told you about my first one. Let me tell you about my most recent one, Come Back Swinging. I knew that I wanted to talk about some of the triumphs and challenges in my past. And I wanted to talk about the story of me coming of age. You want to start with, what do you want to say? So let me get right into it. One of the things that I help people to break down the walls is to not say that you're writing a book. I want you to think of it as, I am telling a story. Because, you think book, you think it's long, you think I can't do it. First of all, you have books that are 20 pages, and then you have books that are 1,000 pages. So, let's use different language. You're telling your story. Let's start with the very first phase. The first phase that I help people to really get into is what I call a creative phase. This is where you just write. You write whatever comes to mind. And this is the key. Listen to me here. If you're taking notes, take notes and write this down. You should write during this period at least 5 days out of the week. I think you should do it every day. That's what I challenge people to do. But I understand some people, you want to take days off, whatever. So let's treat it like a work week, but at least 5 out of 7 days during this creative phase that we're talking about, you need to be writing. And you need to be writing for longer than 30 minutes a day, consistently, at least. Don't think about chapters. Don't think about titles. Don't think about, just write. Let me start with that too, because people say, well, I want to start with the title. No, that's often the last thing that comes to you. And even if you have a title, people will tell you it's a working title. Don't worry about any of that. This is what messes people up. I don't know what chapter should be and all that. You might start writing now something that's going to be at the end of your book. You might write 2 weeks from now something that will be at the middle. Don't worry about that. Every day, just write. I want to get you in the habit of your juices flowing, of being creative again, of artistry. We're getting out of the terminology of book writing, and I'm taking you into the realm of artistry. That's really what it is. You're telling a story that you want the world to hear, whether it's advice, whether it's fiction, whether it's nonfiction, whether it's funny, whether it's a narrative, whether it's a warning, a caution, something that's, just meant to be entertaining, that's educational, inspirational. You're telling a story. And your product on the written page, listen to me here, is going to be a product of what's coming out of your spirit and your soul. I'm going to repeat that for you. The product of what is coming out on the written page is the product of what's coming out in your spirit and your soul. That's part of the reason why I advise people that have the resources to do it, pull away for a month and just be creative. I mean, there's a reason why, when people talk about uh, uh, particularly music artists, they're creating this album and they go in the studio. It's not just this period of being in the studio where they're actually recording for 2 or 3 hours. It's a period of maybe a couple months where they're in this artist, they're in this phase of development. They're in this phase of creativity. They're in this phase of thinking and ruminating. What happens is when you start to write every day or 5 days out of 7, I promise you what happens is you start to think of things. Let me give you another tip here. Keep a pen and pad next to you when you sleep. You'll be surprised what comes to you in the middle of the night, what comes to you in the morning, what comes to you at random times. See, now you're in the habit of writing. You're in the habit of expressing your thoughts. Don't worry about tomorrow picking up where yesterday was. In fact, I don't think you should do that unless that naturally occurs to you the next day. I think you just keep writing and you keep writing and you keep writing. I'm going to bring you to the second phase, but trust me, phase 1 is just your creative phase. I'm just getting you back in the sense of falling in love with the process of hearing yourself tell the story. Maybe even as you're telling it, you're laughing, you're smiling, maybe you're crying, but you are getting that out onto paper. Let me just say an aside here. I've read books and people have said to me, because I've read hundreds of books. Let me just, beyond coaching people and writing, helping people write the books a lot, I've read hundreds of books, book connoisseur. And I've had people say, it took me 10 years to write it. And I'm thinking in my mind, I can tell the way it's written. I'm not talking about 10 years of experiences to come to the understandings that bring us to the page. I'm not talking about that. But you can tell when a book is disjointed. And you just can, or I can at least. It feels like it feels weird. So part of this process of creativity is bringing you into, I'm going to use a word here. It's bringing you into a spiritual place of alignment. We're all spirit beings, a spiritual place of alignment, so you can then get in tune with who you are and what you want to say enough so it can then pour out of you. Because what's going to come out, this creative phase is going to be the basis of it. Okay, so let me tell you a couple of things that I want to talk about in this creative phase, and let's move on. Every day you need to be writing. Every day I think you should do it at least for 30 minutes. I don't mean 10 minutes here, 5 minutes here. I'm on my phone here writing, and then I go and do. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about uninterrupted time, blocks of time where you're able to write. Now, maybe you got 30 minutes here and then another block of 30 minutes here, and another block of 30 minutes here. But you really need time to write, to get complete thoughts out. That's what you want to do. You'll know when you're writing, when you come to a natural ending point of something. Don't censor what you have to say. This is very important here. What you are writing right now on paper, not only is it not necessarily what will end up in the published book, but it probably won't. And don't stifle yourself by censoring what you write, because what it'll do is it'll hurt the process. Sometimes you got to go through the ugly part in order to get to the beautiful prose or writing that says this is how I wanted it to say. But maybe it's emotional or whatever. You've had to get something else out. Write freely. You have to write freely. I've seen and I've coached people through the process, and I can read when they're writing, and I'm like, you're censoring this. I can tell it. You're holding back. You're cautious about, you're almost thinking in your mind like a press agent, what would the world think about it? Just write right now, all right? Remember the power of incremental progress. If you are to write, let's say you write 5 pages a day. At the end of 30 days, if every day you wrote, that's 150 pages. You'll be surprised how easy it is to write 5 pages when you use the process that I'm telling you to use. Not chapter by chapter, line by line. Every day you pick some time and you write what comes to heart. You write what comes to mind. You write, because since it's already comes to mind, it's already in your heart, it's going to be easy for it to spill out. The problem is, it's hard for us to write when we don't want to write about something. What I'm trying to do is get you in the process of writing in a way that it feels natural. It feels like, hey, it feels as natural as talking. You wouldn't feel odd if someone says, hey, I want to pay you right now $10,000 for you to tell me for 3 hours, the top 10 lessons you learned in life. You probably wouldn't think twice about that, especially if I tell you it's not a public conversation, it's a private one-on-one. But if I tell you I'm going to pay you $10,000 for 3 hours to just sit there and write, you probably would be a little bit intimidated. Even if I tell you you're going to get $10,000 at the end of the 3 hours anyway, but you have to sit there and write 3 straight hours. And so sometimes what happens is we just get in our own way with that. And so I want to get you out of that and get you into feeling like this is natural. Writing is another expression of my thoughts, just like speaking is. Now we move to the second portion, which is the development phase. And I'm going to get into timetable in a second, because you might be listening and say, well, how long? So I guess I'll get into the timetable now. If you want to do it in 90 days, every phase I'm giving you, do it in 30 days. Simple. But I'll give you some other timetables if you need longer periods and you want to make it a longer process. But phase 2 is your development phase. So now you've been writing every day, or at least 5 out of 7 days. You've gotten in the habit of putting pen to paper. At this point, if you've done it the way that I'm telling you to do it, you at least have 100 pages easy written down. Now, I'm not telling you to go back and read it at this point. In fact, I would encourage you probably don't. You're just writing. It's all probably seems like a jumbled mess because you got to, story here, story there, story here. How do you save it? I'm going to give you a practical tip on your computer. Put it all in a folder. Save this story here, this story there. I probably wouldn't save it by dates because you may not remember what did I say on this date, but save it, story here, story there. You can be that descriptive, put in the thing, story about this or advice about that. Okay. What is the development phase? The development phase is now where you are beginning to bring your building blocks together. Let me pretend like we're playing Legos. First you play Legos, you pour all the Legos out, and they're all over the floor, and you're kind of grabbing to see which ones you want. Oh, I want that one because in your mind you want to build a big tower. Oh, I need that piece because that piece is going to fit with that. That was the first phase. You're getting the words out, you're getting the stories out, you're getting the emotions out, you're putting things down. Now the development phase is let's get your Lego blocks and begin to build a structure. Incidentally, if I'm writing every day, the structure is going to begin to take place in my mind. See what I'm doing here? See what I'm giving you a structure. If I spent 20, 30, 40 minutes just with my Legos, and give you an analogy here, looking at pieces and taking pieces, not necessarily putting them together, but putting them in a pile. After a while, I start to get a vision of what I want to make and how now those pieces are going to fit together. This is what happens here. So this is why I don't want to discourage you if you say, well, how would I write a whole book? All I have is one story. Or I know I want to say this one thing. How would it be a whole book? You start now, you start with that one thing leads to another, you write more. Then you realize, I thought the book was about this. Grace Will Lead Me Home was the most recent book that I thought I was writing. Halfway in, I realized this is less about redemption, it's more about resilience. And so it became what was Grace Will Lead Me Home became Come Back Swinging. The essence of the book didn't change, but I became clearer on what the essence was. Yeah. That's something different. I won't even get, because I don't want to bother that, because what I'm really trying to tell you is when you understand that there is already an essence esoterically in what you're trying to capture, and the closer you can get to what's already been captured esoterically on earth is where your success lies. So what does the development process look like? The development process looks like naturally already something comes in your mind. Again, I want to go back to the fact that this is why you cannot belabor that that creative phase. Let's go back to the disjointed books I told you about. If you call yourself, well, I'm just creative and I'm writing for a whole year, you can do that, but now the development phase becomes harder because now I have to remember what did I write over that year. So the more condensed my the more condensed my creative phase is, that beginning, even though it might be intense, instead of me spending 30 minutes a day, I might spend 3 hours a day for 30 days. The more intense that is, that's going to allow me in that development phase to remember what I wrote, to have a tighter, stronger structure, because it's clearer now because I'm living in it more. Does that make sense? I mean, this doesn't have to forget books for a second. If you do something for 20 minutes a day, you're going to get some level of dexterity. But if you do it for 3 hours, you're going to start to come up with some ideas in week 2 that you didn't have in week 1. just by virtue of the fact you put more time into it. So the development phase, what happens is now you can start to move things into a structure. This is when I advise. Now you do start, maybe if you don't think of chapters first, think about it in parts. So if it's an advice book, and maybe some of the advices, I remember I was helping one young lady, she was doing an advice book on love, relationships, and sex. So I said, well, split love, relationship, sex, and take everything that's in those three categories and just put them in three different documents where you think they should go. And then we'll figure out later how to edit. Because see, I'm taking you through three phases: creative, development, editing. We didn't get to editing yet. We're in development. But what development is, I'm still writing every day. Let me say this. I'm still writing every day. But now I'm writing with the goal of developing into a structure. And what I'm also doing is now I am writing with the intent of, let me pick up on this story that I remember I wrote on before that maybe I forgot about because I didn't remember. I didn't read what I wrote in the creative phase, because in my creative phase, I'm just writing. Wednesday, I might not have picked up what I did on Tuesday. But now in development phase, now that I'm reading what I wrote, I'm going back over, I realized, wait a minute, I stopped on Tuesday mid-story and I really never picked this up at all. So now I might complete that story. See, this is what's happening in the development phase, but now it's clear because now I'm like kind of going back over and giving that second coat of paint. I'm trying to give you many different analogies because I'm trying to get you to see there's a natural flow of how to put out the book, and it doesn't have to be as daunting as you might think. So now the chapters and subsections become a lot more simpler because they just take shape. It makes sense to you. You know what? This doesn't make sense to put this here because I thought I was talking about this here. But now, as I see my writings over the course of 100 pages or however many pages are together, I realize this is better well said here. Or maybe I'll take this out. Maybe I realize this story was cathartic just for me to say it, but this is more personal. I don't want to put this, right? So I move this. Still writing every day now, but I'm editing. I am adding. I'm maybe taking things away. But then I come to editing phase, which is phase 3. Now you might say, well, Darrell, well, how is editing different than development if I'm adding, if I'm taking away? The difference still with development is think of development like the bridge between creative and editing. You're still writing every day. You still might wake up that next day and say, I'm just going to write on something completely different and not do any changing or structure. I'm just doing, just more writing creative. With editing now I've moved from phase 1, which is just the Legos are all on the floor and I'm just moving them around to see what I want to build. Phase 2, I know what I want to build. I have it in my mind. I've got my pieces together and I'm starting to put them up. Now phase 3 is I'm building, I'm putting it together, and I'm very clear on it. And I'm shaving off things that I realize this is probably for another book. I've done this many times. I write a story, great story. I love the story. That doesn't fit with this book. Let's move this. Let's change this. The editing phase is now where I'm really coming to the place of bringing this all together. Now I want to talk about these different types of editing. I'm not talking about grammar and syntax. I'm talking about the type of editing where it really is like substantive edits. Not did you put a comma here, did you capitalize that? The substantive editing piece is, should this story even be here? Should it be chapters or should it be sections? Should it be, is this a poem book that has poems, or is it not a poem book? It's a narrative that just has short stories. That's what I'm talking about. So what we're doing here is we're going through now with this sort of first with a big comb, but then a fine tooth comb, and going through and taking this really from a manuscript to a completed work. So let me get into some of the fears of writing, and then I'm gonna give you tips, and then we'll end this broadcast here. Some of the fears that people have in writing is that I can't do it. I hope I just spelled this for you. Yes, you can. I mean, look how simple. I hope that I broke this down for you. How easy it is to do right where you are. Another thing people say is I don't have the language to do it. All right, so I'm going to do some tips later, but let me give you a little tip here. Now, in the age of Fiverr, third-party resources where you can find editors and proofreaders and ghostwriters and all these other folks that will help you put together your book on the internet in a simple Google search, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Even if you don't feel like you have the language to do it, somebody else has the language to take what's in your mind and get it out there. So just start by writing what you know, and somebody else can help you expand on it. I'm not educated enough to do it. Writing a book has nothing to do with education, not even a little bit. It'll take too long. I showed you how you can do this in 90 days. 30 days of creating, 30 days of development, 30 days of editing. I wouldn't advise going beyond a year, 4 months of each of these process. I think if you start saying I'm writing a book, consciously saying you're writing a book, and it's taking you more than a year, we're getting into a different type place. So I hope I showed you that it doesn't take as long as what you probably would think that it would. I've heard people say people don't read books anymore, which is not true at all. In fact, Kindle, the e-reader, has made it so people read books more, maybe not in the way they used to read it, but certainly are reading material. And then, of course, one of the fears that I have, and I see this that I encounter all the time, people don't know how to get started. I think they're scared. They're scared to get started into something that's the unknown. I think we all venture into having fear of the unknown. But the best way to start is just to start. Where do you start? Do you teach something? Are you known for something? What do you like or interest you? Where are you credible? Where's your passion or talent? What do you want to teach? What do you wish you were known for, right? These are ways to start. Start right there. Last thing, tips. Firstly, what I didn't have that you have at your disposal now that I didn't have in 2004, you've got technology. So I remember I wrote the book. I was at home with my mom at the time. She didn't know I was writing the book, but, it's during the break, I already told you, between freshman and sophomore year. So I'm back home for college, back home during the college summer in my old room. I remember writing in there for 5-6 hours a day. And then after about 6 weeks of writing, I was like, okay, now what? And then I began the process of looking for a self-publishing company and figured out the process. It was no Amazon then, and if it was, they didn't do this type of work. I had to figure out how to get the book out there. I had to figure out how to get it edited. Who's going to edit the book? And I'm trying to remember who did the editing. I think I had like a family member edit it first. I know I sent it to my mom to read. I read it too. I remember I was so proud of my book. Like I read her every chapter. She just laughed. She just, ate up my work. My mom's always been a big supporter of my work. So I'm just putting it out to say that now you have technology at your disposal. Fiverr is a great resource. If you don't know Fiverr, Fiverr.com, check it out. Awesome resource. You are able to, with Fiverr, you can literally find people that can help you do anything technologically. So whether that's, that's for almost anything, but I'm talking now proofreading, editing, ghostwriting. Use technology. Use technology to your advantage. Use people to. So remember, I go back to the creative phase, the development phase, and the editing phase. I'm going to show you how to break down the timeline even less than 90 days. After you finish the creative phase and the development phase, you can send it to an editor right from there, at least to have a first pass at it, to look at what they think, send it to you, then you can read from there and do the second level of edits and then send it to them, back to them to do polishing. But that's at your disposal. I wouldn't suggest, you have to have somebody proofread these and edit it. So you need, at some point, whether it's phase 1, 2, or 3, you're going to have people come in to help support you through the process. So part of people supporting you through the process is that technology, using the resources that's going to help you. Second thing is lean into your strengths. Lean into what you're already good at, what you're already known for, what people already think you're credible with, even, if you have not necessarily established credibility, but you seem credible. Where is that place? Because that's going to be important. And then the last tip that I'll tell you is get started. Just start. You might say, well, when do I get started? Do I start at the beginning of the month? Do I start now, actually? When I get done with this podcast, wait for me to get done at least, please let me finish. When it finished and you shared this podcast and you told your friends about it, after that, start writing then. Get right down to business. Start writing. Start with where you're comfortable. It doesn't have to be I think I made very clear, we talk about writing. I don't know. I guess some people do pen to paper. You can use your computer. That's how I use my laptop. You can use your phone. You can use your what do you call it? Your what are they? iPads, tablets. That's what I mean to say. There's also these transcription apps that you can speak into and it can transcribe. And yeah, at some point it's got to be edited. Somebody's got to read back over it. It's got to make sure that it's transcribed right. But I'm just saying that there are ways that you can write a book that doesn't have to be your grandfather's way of sitting over an old typewriter, pecking at keys. I don't think I ever would have gotten the book out that way. Now, though, we have tools and resources at our disposal. I'll end by saying, if you are interested in knowing more, if you want to start either by writing your own book or you want to market your book, you've got your book out. I'm going to do a podcast on that too. How to market your book, how to get it out there, how to brand yourself. You need help with any of that, reach out to me at darrellbennett.com or contact at darrellbennett.com because certainly I would love to sit down with you and help you, as I've helped many people get their stories to paper and get you to a place where you're not just making a great amount of income with your story, but you're making a great amount of impact. Okay, that's it for today. I'll be back with more, as always, as I end every podcast, every broadcast. It is my pleasure to say, no matter what has happened in your life, in your space, I guarantee you, you can, you will, you shall come back swinging. My name is Darrell Bennett. Thank you for listening.